theme of our conference, entitled The Last Generation Candidates for Heaven's Society, is now to be displayed in true clarity in the subject of this hour. Because the candidates for Heaven's Society engage in religious subjects, religious relationships. And that is what our subject is, the religious fulfillments in this generation. The generation, in the last generation, the last generation's religious events. So as we study the prophecies and they unfold before us in the religious world, coming to the climax in this generation, we are actually discovering in this study the true candidacy for the heavenly society that is being brought to the surface in this last generation because of the experiences that are revealed in the prophecies of God's people throughout the history to this point in time. So follow carefully and be encouraged to learn from the prophecies the day star with whom we are to connect today. It's beautiful. As we continue the meditation of Matthew 24, where Jesus spoke of the future generation that he was talking about when the fig tree shoots, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So in the fulfillment of the prophecies in reference to the religious aspects, we pick them up. Follow carefully here in Matthew 24, reading there as he speaks to the disciples in verses 3 to 5. Matthew 24, verses 3 to 5. He commences with this amazing precursor to everything that follows thereafter. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And when shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, what's the first thing he says to them? Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Here he introduces the religious element as he prophesies the future. All the way through the religious exercise, he has prepared the mind to wake up to the grave danger, to be very alert, to take heed. It's interesting that the statement that deals with prophecy in Peter there, where we were reading, the day star will arise, says that blessed are those who take heed. And Jesus says here, take heed that no man deceive you. Because these false Christs will arrive in the religious experiences of life. And these things must come to pass. They must come to pass. And these things will come to pass in the last generation, as we have been highlighting all the way through. So, a prophetic development from the beginning when he commences to speak there through to the very end, the developments of a religious character is what we will pick up on here. He continues in verse 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. This is a religious experience, foreshadowed in prophecy. The Christian, the faithful believer in Jesus, will be afflicted, will be killed, will be hated because of his religious affiliation with Jesus Christ. We continue in verse 11. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. In the religious realm, you will see the love of God waxing cold, because iniquity abounds. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. What's that? Candidates for the heavenly society? Who? He who will endure is the candidate. Not to lose his love in the oppressive circumstances. And verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. What Jesus has just played out before our mind's eye is that the Christianity, true Christianity, is to spread everywhere until all the world is covered. In the religious prophetic fulfillments, we are to see the gospel of the kingdom being preached in all the world. And many people think, well, many in the whole world are going to be saved by that. It doesn't say that. Jesus says, only for a witness unto all nations. And then shall the end come. In this religious foreshadowing of events to the last generation, to the very end, at the end, when the end shall come, the gospel of the kingdom is spread across the whole world, but not necessarily going to save them. It is a witness to all the world. So in this lineup that Jesus has given there, from the time he started to this end in verse 14, he depicts the rising of true Christianity and the rising of false Christianity, false prophets, false Christs. They parallel through the history. What was it there? Verse 11, many false prophets shall arise and deceive many. This is false Christianity. And the faithful Christianity communicates the pure gospel for a witness only. And so the parallel running of Christianity is the false and the true that he foreshadows here in these words. So we are interested in the last generation but to arrive to a correct understanding of the experiences of the last generation in the religious segment of these prophecies, we must have a correct understanding of that which was leading up to that. And so, if we come there to, as he said, false prophets will arise, and as he gives the next overview, in verse 15, he comes up again and starts back from the destruction of Jerusalem, and he comes up to the papal period in verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. He is describing the period of papal dominance in which all the heretics, the faithful and true people who were regarded as heretics, would be slaughtered. And as the history shows, there were, over this period of time, 50 million, the estimation of 50 million, and it was probably more than that, of faithful Christians were slaughtered. And that's what he said, didn't he? That they will be killed. In verse 9, you will be afflicted and you will be killed and hated of all nations. This was the papal period of experience back there in the period of papal dark ages. As we come to return there to verse 4, we are reminded there with what I highlighted before, that we are to take heed. The Christian was to take heed not to be deceived, because many shall come in my name. Well, let's explore what the apostles in their day already identified, and how to identify, because he says, take heed that you don't be deceived. Apostle John, in 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, gives us a very clear understanding of the arising of the false prophets that lead into the false doctrine that became part of the papal church. 1 John chapter 4, verse 3. And there we have a very vivid revelation of the canker of false doctrine that Jesus said you should take heed that you don't be deceived on, that will enlarge and continue to the very last generation. Here it says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof you have heard that it should come, and even now already is it in the world. As Apostle John was living near the end of his life, the false doctrines were already being generated. The idea that Jesus there was something special about the body of Jesus, the flesh of Jesus, that was pure and holy. The immaculate conception that is being taught by the papal church already at that time was identified as the beginning, the precursor to the false doctrines that will continue. And as we know so well, we heard it this morning, this beautiful central truth of the Saviour's atonement, that Jesus truly experienced our flesh, so that it was sinful flesh, so that as the sin was stirred up in him by the Lord laying upon him the iniquity of us all, it came up to his neck. This was something that was anathema to the false doctrines, to the false teachers, to the false prophets. They teach that Jesus did not come in sarx, that's the original word, flesh of sin. Did not come in the flesh. That is the spirit of Antichrist. And Apostle John said there in those words, you have heard that it should come, and even now, in his time already, it is come into the world. If we come over to his words in 1 John 2, 18 and 19, here he says it. Little children, it is the last time. And as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us. But they went out, that they might be made manifest, that they were not all of us. And as Jesus said in his prophecy, take heed that no man deceive you. Here the Apostle John is showing us, look, and the development of false doctrine was happening. Antichrist was being developed right there. And he said, these are the last days, but it's not the last generation. The language that Apostle Paul uses there is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 2 to 8, where the prophecy that he reveals is what Apostle John had said was already happening in their day. That's why Jesus said right at the beginning, take heed that no man deceive you. And that's 2 Thessalonians, reading there in chapter 2 and verses 2 through to 8. That you be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you I told you these things, and now you know that what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. God is permitting things to take their course. He's letting it happen. And he's letting it happen so that his prophecies that he has foreshadowed will be fully fulfilled. And we are looking right at the beginning of the Christian era where the apostle were telling us, look, it's already revealing itself, but it's not the end yet. Don't let anybody deceive you. Jesus isn't coming yet. There's going to be a terrible falling away in all its enormity. And then, because God is letting it take its course, verse 8, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. So we have a very clear prophetic precursor to the last generation. The last generation will see what is said there, that the wicked should be completely revealed by that time, and it will be just at the time when the Lord shall consume him with the spirit of his mouth and shall destroy him with the brightness of his coming. So after the papal release, after the papacy has had its period of time, which commenced already in principle back there, but it took its course until the Pope was taken prisoner in 1798, we read back in Matthew chapter 24 what would happen immediately after the tribulation of those days. Matthew Matthew 24, 23 and 24. Right? He finished in verse 22 where we were reading, except those days should be shortened. We know that in 1755, the first sign, before 1798, they were shortened. The Reformation had taken place and the persecution was slowed down. And what would happen? As soon as God's people would be released from papal darkness, then, verse 23, if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs, and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. So, as Jesus gave in Matthew there, he gave each sort of period, he gave a rundown of the developments. He came there in the second rundown to the point that after papal persecution, after the Dark Ages, there would arise again false prophets. The Reformation had brought the pure doctrines to the forefront to continue to develop, and for the faithful message to develop into a pure presentation for the last generation. And immediately false prophets continue to claim this is Christianity. They will say, oh, look, here is Christ, here is the body of Christ, this is the true church. And the others say, no, this is the true church. Isn't that what happened as they all came up, these reformers? They had all different Christian ideas. And each one was claiming, here is Christ, here, you've got to hear him, no, here, and so on. There shall arise false Christs and false prophets. And wonders, great wonders would be shown in these bodies of people, insomuch as if it were possible, they may deceive the very elect. And I love verse 25, behold, I have told you before. Isn't the Lord Jesus wonderful? So this now is the other precursor that gives us the understanding of what to expect in the last generation, because it continues near the end and just at the end. Because if we come now to verses 44 to 51, we see the lineup of prophecy and the experience of God's people at the very end. Matthew 24, verse 44 to 51. And it's part of Jesus' outline of prophecy. He says, verse 44, therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh. He's pointing directly now at the period just before his coming. And at that period, verse 45, who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But, and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and what does he begin to do? Just what those have done before, who had become corrupted in this generation now, at the very end, where Jesus says, be careful here now, again. Take heed that no man deceive you. Here is a man, here is a ministry that says in his heart, he preaches that Jesus is coming, but in his heart, he says, not in his preaching, in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. And what does he do with the servants that are giving the meat in due season? He begins to smite his fellow servant, and he eats and drinks with the drunken. The drunken, who have been made drunk by the false doctrine of the papacy, have been in existence all the way along, and now he unites and drinks with them. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You see here in the prophecy, all through history, the faithful being opposed by the unfaithful, by the false prophets, and this now accumulates in repetition to the last generation, which he now gives an overview on, where you have the preachers of the advent of Christ, the coming of Jesus, ever since 1844, that there develops another experience of the false and the true together. Faithful servant preaching the coming of Jesus and all related to it, meat in due season. The unfaithful servant who in his heart, not in his preaching, reveals. And so while they are still preaching the Advent message to some degree, making a profession of godliness in this terrible time, denying the power thereof, that's exactly what this is talking about. This ministry begins to oppose, and we expect to see this, and we see it around us. This is prophecy fulfilling right in front of our eyes today. And I don't need to go into detail to show the heart-sickening events that have happened in the ranks of Seventh-day Adventism. We know them. So the process of false coming from among the true is repeated here in the last generation. And let us follow through another lineup of prophecies that Jesus gave in regards to the religious elements that lead us to the last generation, and identify the true in prophecy, of whom we want to be part of, and of whom we are studying here, candidates for the heavenly society. Here it is in the prophecies of Revelation chapter 2 and 3, the 7 churches. This is a religious outline and progressive picture of the religious experience of God, of the people. It's Revelation chapter 2, verse 1, brings out the early church, the church of Ephesus. Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, These things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. He speaks to the early church from the time that he left to the time of 100 AD. he says, I know your works, and thy labour, and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars. Can you see how that lines up? He says, let no man deceive you. There it is. I know who you are, what you're doing. And then he says in verse 4, nevertheless I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. So here is the early church. Now what's the next period? Revelation 2 verse 8. Unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last which was dead and is alive. This is the period of pagan persecution. As we see the experience of God's people, the religious experiences where the pagan world persecutes and exactly what Jesus said, they will afflict you and they will kill you. That is the next event there. Smyrna. Then comes chapter 2, verse 12 and 13. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith. This is now the release of pagan persecution. Pagans have become Christians under Constantine. And the Christian church has shifted its headquarters to Rome, the seat where Satan sits. Rome was the center of pagan religion. Now it has become the center of the Christian religion. And so this is the period in which the persecution of paganism has ceased, and they sit upon a very prominent position as a people. He says, I know your works, and that you are holding fast to my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in these days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. Antipas. Antipapa. Because at that time, the development of release from pagan persecution began to swell and continued to swell as to what Jesus said already and what John said already in their day. The spirit of Antichrist was developing. It now comes by the release of the persecution. Now it develops. And there was Antipapa, the faithful people who were raising their voice against the prominence of those who were in top leadership at the center of the church. You can see the development of prophecy unfolding. And then we come to chapter 3 of Revelation. Chapter 2, first of all, verse 18. And what do we have here? This is the next segment of experience as we continue through to the end. Unto the angel of the church in Thyatira write, these things saith the Son of God, who hath his eyes like unto a flame of fire, and his feet are like fine brass. I know your works and charity and service and so on. And then he talks about the Jezebel, the corruption within the church there, that he shows that this is the period in which the papal church, the Dark Ages, is happening to the faithful. They are being persecuted under papal persecution. And we come then, as we had read already from Jesus, there comes a release from that. Just prior 1798, and then 1798 when the Pope was taken prisoner. And what period comes next? Chapter 3, verse 1. Unto the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things saith he that hath the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest and art dead? Because when papal persecution ceased, the Reformation Protestant developments, that was their name, Protestants, a name that you live. By the time papal persecution ceased, they have a name that they live, but again deny the power thereof. You have a name that you live, but you're dead. And he tries to awaken them out of that condition. That was the Protestant period, where papal period had no more control. And then we come to chapter 3, verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, These things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth and no man openeth. Here is the Philadelphian period, which commenced in 1833 and continued to 1844, because it was the preaching of the first angel's message of Jesus going into the most holy place. The hour of his judgment is come. I have set before you an open door. Get ready to walk through it. This is the advancing history in prophecy that takes you to the next. After 1844, Revelation 3, verse 14. Unto the angel of the church of Laodiceans write, These things saith the Amen, and faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. In the seven churches prophecy, Jesus is simply repeating in greater detail what he shared in the overviews of Matthew 24. It's the same Jesus, and we have just seen the overview there in as brief a span as possible, that we have come now to the closing period of Earth's history that takes us in the message of Laodicea to the very last generation. Because there in 1844 was the beginning of and especially 1848 was the beginning of the Laodicean people, and he gives them the counsel. They become unfaithful. He wishes that they would change, but then you can see the last generation in this lineup in verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him, and he with me. Here is the true understanding being revived in the last generation, which has been so bombarded by the false doctrine that Jesus really did come in sinful flesh to sup with us. And that's what we heard so beautifully this morning. The exchange. We take his cup and he takes our cup. We drink together. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. I want to come in and do this with you. To any man. The Laodicean condition, which he says, because you say you are rich and increased with goods and have need of nothing, I will spew you out. He's speaking to the church, to the angel of the church of Laodicea, to the leadership, and he says to them, unless you repent, I have to spew you out. So he comes to any man. If any man will open the door, he appeals, and in this prophecy there is the last generation picture developing. The very last generation of faithful people. Whereas all the way through the false and the true have been walking side by side, as we have seen through this prophecy picture. We want to have a look here, the false and the true in their final display in the last generation. Remember that a woman in prophecy is his people versus the impure woman. Just reading there briefly in Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 2. so that as we go on reading the prophecies, we can quickly understand, yes, this is a prophecy of the false and the true in their experience in the last generation. Jeremiah 6, reading there, verse 2. I have likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman. So, what can we read in the prophecy about this woman, which is the daughter of Zion? Well, we turn there to Song of Solomon. Remember we read there, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man will open to me, I will come into him." So we're talking about the last generation picture now in the Song of Solomon prophecy about this woman of Zion, this daughter of Zion. Song of Solomon, chapter 5. Song of Solomon 5, reading there in verses 1 to 8. This delicate woman. I am come into my garden, my sister, my spouse. Now this is the bridegroom. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends, drink, yea, drink abundantly, and, O beloved. He's talking about eating and drinking of God's word. And now, this is the beloved, this is the church. I sleep, but my heart waketh. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled. For my head is filled with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. This is Jesus, Gethsemane. And he's saying to his people in the last generation, knock, knock, can I come in? If any man will open. And this is his beloved, my sister, my love, my dove. And what does she say? Oh, I have put off my coat. How shall I put it on? I have washed my feet. How shall I defile them? Can you see what the church is doing here? We are all absorbed in our own comforts. To be a follower of Jesus all the way is tedious. I'm more comfortable in my own fleshly bed. And everything that Jesus is wanting to enter into with us is an obnoxious thought. It's a burden. Oh dear, I'm too comfortable in my bed. And Jesus is knocking. Can we exchange? Can we exchange your sin with me and my righteousness with you? Oh, I'm too tired. Why? So eventually, because the knock is so intense, I rose up to open to my beloved, and my hands dropped with myrrh, and my fingers with sweet-smelling myrrh upon the handles of the lock. You see this sort of languid representation of Christianity here? I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had withdrawn himself and was gone. My soul failed when he spake. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. The watchmen that went about the city found me. They smote me, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls took away my veil from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him that I am sick of love. Isn't it phenomenal? This is a prophecy for the last generation, because Jesus identified it in Revelation chapter 3, verse 14 onwards there. I'm standing at the door, verse 20. And the church that has been in love with Jesus is so out of touch that eventually when she finally gets there to actually open the door, where is he? And where does she go to find him? Out in the streets to the other fallen churches. And if we read there in chapter 6, verse 1, they say to her, "Whither is thy beloved gone, O thou fairest among women? Whither is thy beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with thee?" And this is, you hear the preachers of today. They are telling you today, in this generation, we've got to find Jesus. We've got to find him more clearly than we have him so far. And so they're actually saying that sort of language. I hear them saying it, and when they talk like that, I think, why am I separated? I should be there. But Jesus has left them. Why has he left them? Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1. This is the culmination of the 7 churches. Laodicea is the last one. And that's the one that Jesus was knocking there, and they didn't open to him till it was too late. And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, "We will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel." Right? We will do our own ways. "Only let us be called by thy name to take away our reproach." This is the Christianity of the general world today in the last generation. We want to do our own thing. We want to have our own opinions, our own doctrines, our own righteousness, but just to be called Christian, so that we will still feel that we are acceptable, to take away our reproach. Is this not what we are watching in this generation? Psalms 45, verses 7 to 11, paints the picture vividly again. Psalms 45, verses 7 to 11. And this is speaking as a prophecy of Jesus Christ and him as the lover of the church, and so on. "Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. Therefore thy God hath anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. All thy garments smell of myrrh and aloes and cassia out of the ivory palaces whereby they have made thee glad. Kings' daughters were among thy honourable women. Upon thy right hand did stand the queen in gold of Ophir." You see, these are all the churches of the past. They've all been part of him. Verse 10, "Hearken, O daughter, and consider, and incline thine ear. Forget also thine own people and thy father's house. So shall the king greatly desire thy beauty, for he is thy Lord, and worship thou him." So shall the king greatly desire whom? Hearken, O daughter. The queen, her children, which we have seen in the prophecies, the early church, then the papal church, through the history, there's the mother, the daughters, and among the daughters, these mothers were all part of Christ, but they have fallen. And now comes this last generation. "O daughter, consider, and incline thine ear. Forget also thine own people." What? and thy father's house. Isn't this the message for these last days? Be separate. Separate even from those who claim to be Christians. What was it there in 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through to 5? They have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof. What's the next statement? From such turn away. Here it is. Hearken, O daughter, consider, incline thine ear, forget also thine own people and thy father's house. So shall thy king greatly desire thy beauty, for he is thy Lord, and worship thou him. The last generation candidates for the society of heaven. He is calling for the last generation here. And this last generation daughter, powerfully expressed in Song of Solomon 6. Song of Solomon 6. Here the picture is played out before us in prophetic symbolism. Chapter 6, verse 8 through to 10. There are 80 queens, and 80 concubines, and virgins without number. Is this true for this generation? So vivid. The mainline churches, we talk of mainstream Adventism, mainstream Protestantism. 80 queens and 80 concubines. Amongst the mainstreams there are big churches that are concubines, that have Satanism within them. They claim to be Christian, but they're concubines. And virgins. Multiple little companies, independent companies without number. Among them all, what? My dove, my undefiled, is but one. She is the only one of her mother. She is the choice one of her that bare her. The daughters saw her and blessed her, yea, the queens and the concubines, and they praised her. Who is she? That looketh forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners. The last generation. And as we explore the prophecies of the last generation religious experiences, we pick it up there again from Matthew 24, what we read in verse 48, the unfaithful servant that eats and drinks with the drunken. What does he do? He joins with the drunken in Babylon. Look at the history fulfilling before us there. What is the Seventh-day Adventist Church doing? They are part of the World Council of Churches. They interact together as fellow buddies, eating and drinking together. This is the unfaithful servant that eats and drinks with the drunken, who says in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. And this development of what happened in the past, by learning the understanding of the past, which I introduced in the beginning, that we must know how the past works so that we can understand how the present works, you go to Revelation chapter 6, and there you have the 4 horses, which depicts the demise of the early Christian church into the false. The first one is a what? A white horse. The second one is a red horse. The third one is a black horse. And the fourth one is a pale, deadly-looking one. This is the demise, the developmental demises of the Christian church to that point in time where she became the papal persecuting people. And that development unto death is now repeated in the prophecies for the last generation. Have a look at it there in Revelation 17. Now we are going right into the detail of the prophecy for the last generation, of what to expect as it was in times of old. Revelation 17, reading there verses 3 to 5. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of the abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. He was bewildered, he was overwhelmed, and he wonders there. And now, this is the mother, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. So you get all the other harlots with her. And looking at the last generation, Revelation 13 to 17. Revelation 13, verses 13 to 17. This is the apostate Protestantism of USA. He doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven. We've covered all that. He deceiveth, verse 14, them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles. Verse 15, he hath power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. If you don't fraternize with the beast, with the papacy, you're going to be killed ultimately. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. The same story as in the past is now identified for the last days, in the last generation, a mark. So observe it there as we saw it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 8. 2 Thessalonians, we return there to pick up our thoughts from the past. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 8. And then shall that wicked be revealed. The wicked becomes revealed as the mother of harlots and the daughters, as we saw it there, culminating in the final persecution. The same spirit of persecution, of killing the heretics, is repeated here. And what was written there in the words of Jesus? The unfaithful servant is eating and drinking with them. We are to be candidates. We are to be separated from this, as we've been reading in these prophecies. And what do we experience? He will smite his fellow servant. Have a look with me in Great Controversy. Reading there from page 608 in paragraph 2. We are heading to the eruption of the mountain, the final storm in the religious experiences. As the storm approaches, what do we see? A large class who have professed faith in the third angel's message, but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth, abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition. Is that not what we read there? The servant that says in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. He eats and drinks with the drunken, with Babylon. They abandon their position, their high standards, their principles, abandon them by uniting with the world and partaking of its spirit. Remember Jesus said, be diligent, watch carefully, don't be deceived. It comes in subtly in these last days, but we've got the history of the past and the prophecies to reveal what would happen. And here we see what the spirit of prophecy is saying. Uniting with the world, partaking of its spirit. They have come to view matters in nearly the same light. And when the test is brought, they are prepared to choose the easy, popular side. Oh, I'm tired. I don't want to open the door. I fall for the easy, popular side. Men of talent and pleasing address, great preachers, who once rejoiced in the truth, employ their powers to deceive and mislead souls. Aren't we experiencing it? They become the most bitter enemies of their former brethren. When Sabbath keepers are brought before the courts to answer for their faith, these apostates are the most efficient agents of Satan to misrepresent and accuse them, and by false reports and insinuations to stir up the rulers against them. Now there's much written in reference to this for us in this last generation, that the brethren or those who will be our persecutors, who will bring us to persecution, are those who know us best. Those who know what Adventism is meant to be, and who, as we stand before them, they will then misconstrue. They're past masters at it. Satan has managed to bring them around to be able to reason around things to the point where if you are a candidate, a pure virgin for the Lord, you will be misrepresented. All laid out in prophecy here in the last generation. And so the fulfillment of these things are going to finally cause, as we said there, he will consume and destroy this false system to the end. That's Revelation 19, verses 11, verse 15 and 20. And there it says, he comes with the horses, with the angels, and what does he do with his mouth? He's got a sword that comes out of his mouth that judges the people with a rod of iron. It's the language of his word that will finally show them how corrupt and evil they are. And just prior, the pure church, that is the pure people who are candidates in this generation, is brought into a interaction with these false ones. Revelation 14, 6-12. The pure church listens to the three angels' messages. That's the three angels' messages, 6-12. But did you notice verse 12 there? Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. And what do these people do in Revelation 18? We're looking at prophecy here. What do these people do in Revelation 18, verses 1-4? They proclaim with great power the same thing as previously in the second angel's message. Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Here now is a repetition. But who is included in all these Babylon that are fallen, Not only the Catholic Church, that's already been fallen many years ago. And the daughters have fallen also. Now, who else was joining them? The Seventh-day Adventist ministry, the Laodicean angel. He's eating and drinking with the drunken. So what is the final call of the last generation? Faithful. Come out of her, my people. come out of her, my people. Because God's people are in the ranks of these churches, in these systems, claiming that maybe they could help them. Well, you don't stay there to help them, you come out of them in the last generation. To escape the terrible persecution, as it is cited there in Revelation 13:15 to 16, we've touched on it there, they shall be killed. To escape that, they warn the people and are patiently persevering to stand faithful to the end, because iniquity abounds, the love of many grows cold. No, they will be faithful, they will be patient. They will keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, the very kernel of the spirit of the Antichrist. They will resist. They will engage not only faith in Jesus, but the faith of Jesus. A big difference. The others have a faith in Jesus, but not the faith of Jesus. And so the grand finale of this religious activity in the last generation is portrayed in the application of the false churches and the papacy placing the mark of the beast for us to submit to. And that's, we understand very well from Daniel chapter 7 verse 25, where he has great authority and thinks to change times and laws. He has the mark of his authority as changing the Sabbath to the Sunday. And in this last generation, the depiction of the Sabbath is made prominent by the faithful people, the candidates for heaven. We read it there in Exodus 31. They are identified in the last generation, who are carefully understanding these prophecies and understand the importance of the Sabbath, because it is written here in Exodus 31, verse 13, "Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep. For what is it? It is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you." I am the Lord that what? Doth sanctify you. I am working to prepare you for the society of heaven. The Sabbath is a sign of that. Verse 16, "Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbaths, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." Here now lies the mark of distinction as the Sunday law, the mark of the beast, becomes enforced in the religious experiences in the last generation. If they will not receive the mark, they will be killed. And God's faithful people understanding the sign between them and their God, the sign of the meditation of the Sabbath, which is the meditation of the eternal Sabbath in the heavenly kingdom, the heavenly society, the true keeping of the Sabbath. Let's explore that one for a moment in Isaiah 58. Isaiah chapter 58. Here it is, the last generation people that are faithful. It's so profound how you follow through the history and the prophecy, parallel experiences with the faithful versus the unfaithful. Here it is, the grand finale. Isaiah 58 verse 1. Isaiah 58 verse 1 first, then 12 to 14. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgressions, and the house of Jacob their sins. And then there is a little sort of a interlude of the explanation of things, and then comes verse 12. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. You see, candidates for the heavenly sanctuary, building the old paths so that we will be ushered into the new world, into the eternal world, with paths fully restored into that kind of society. If how? If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honourable, and shalt honour him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words, then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. Here is the religious experience of earth's inhabitants in the last generation. The conflict of the unfaithful servants, all the women that are claiming to be Christians but eating and drinking their own food and covering themselves with their own apparel, ready to persecute and destroy those, and the worst enemies will be our former brethren, which causes this little company in the last generation to do what? When this comes upon them, they have to stand in the courts. What will they do? And what is promised for them? Isaiah chapter 33. This is all prophecy for the people of the last generation, to whom Jesus said, all these things that we have studied in his prophetic outline will be fulfilled to them. Isaiah 33. We can read verse 14 through to verse 16. The sinners in Zion, the sinners in the church, are afraid. Fearfulness hath surprised the hypocrites. Remember? These hypocrites, the unfaithful servant that eats and drinks, they'll be gnashing teeth. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Remember what we were reading there in the nature events? There's going to be fire, there's going to be destruction. In political events, there's going to be fire. Who among us can dwell in all this? He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stoppeth his ears from hearing of blood, and shutteth his eyes from seeing of evil, he shall dwell on high. His place of defence shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his waters shall be sure. As the last generation faithful, his virgin, his undefiled, as they come up to these things, they will know this is last generation behavior. In the religious world, we know what we're seeing here. Prophecy is telling us this. And we will know precisely, just like the people in Jerusalem at the beginning of Christ's prophecy there knew when to escape. These will know too, because they know this is the last generation and we've got to get out of here at the right time, at the right moment. And their place of security is the defence of the munitions of rocks, and their bread and water shall be sure. What about the unfaithful at this time, in this last religious conclusion? when the faithful are so persecuted and they run and they disappear, what will the people, the Christian professed people, the unfaithful, be doing at that time? Another prophecy. Amos chapter 8. Amos chapter 8, reading there verse 11 through to 13. Here is, because remember, in the social realm, at this same time, they'll be running to and fro. Right? Knowledge shall increase, etc. Well, what happens in this same period in reference when God's faithful remnant have been running for their lives? Amos 8:11. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst of water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. And they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, and shall not find it. Why? Because his dove, his undefiled, is in the mountains. They won't be sending the messages through the internet anymore. And the people will travel from one end of the earth on the internet trying to find some preachers that are preaching the pure truth. They'll be running from one set of evangelistic outreaches to other, hungering and thirsting for the pure truth, and they can't find it anymore. It's a famine by their own doing, because they persecuted the ones that will feed them. The words of Jesus come to pass. What were they? Let's go over there to Matthew 25. This was a continuation of Matthew 24. What are the words of Jesus in reference to these people who are running to and fro and will not find it? Matthew 25, verses 29 and 30. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is at the end of the 10 virgins. The 5 virgins are running around. Where can we buy oil? And they come there. Probation has closed. Please let us in. Sorry, I don't know you. And the unfaithful servant who has lost everything he had. And it's very interesting. I've experienced this. I listen to the unfaithful servants sometimes, and they pick out some interesting subjects. And I can take away what they've got, which is true, and the rest of it I reject, of course. And they lose what they once had. This has been my experience in my generation. They lose what they had because later on they changed their understanding. And I got it from the older generations of Adventists who were already faulty. I got some beautiful subjects there which I have built on. And from them it's taken away, and I who already had something, I gained greater benefit. Exactly what is written here. And they will cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. This is the last generation experience. And so we have seen here in this prophetical outline the accumulating information in religious situations that by the time we come to the very last generation, we have a huge display of prophetic revelations that we can see exactly where we stand. And if we will pay attention and pay heed to the words of Jesus, let no man deceive you. Don't let the world come in and take away your concentration on the pure words, because they're going to cause you to lose it. You know what it's like when the things of this world come in and distract you. You want it now. I forgot now. We've got to go over it again. And if we forget what we have gained, like we have gained here, and we forget again and again, the day will come when I'm going to be looking for it and I won't find it anymore. And so we have the positive comfort in the midst of all this last generation dilemma in Isaiah 66. Verse 2 and verse 5. Isaiah chapter 66. Reading there in verse 2 and verse 5. For all those things hath mine hand made, and all those things have been, saith the Lord. But to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and trembleth at my word. Not just hears it, not just enjoys it, but pays such close attention, trembling lest he lose anything. And these people that tremble at my word, verse 5, hear the word of the Lord, you that tremble at his word. Your brethren that hated you, that cast you out for my name's sake, said, let the Lord be glorified. But he shall appear to your joy, and they shall be ashamed. Aren't these prophetic pictures pregnant with amazing, glorious realities? And may it be that as we launch on into the new year, we take these things and don't lose them. The religious experience in these last generation circumstances must be embedded into our nature so that the world cannot distract us, that we can firmly march on and prepare a character that will be fit for the society of heaven. The others aren't preparing them. And once again, we launch into the new year with a Sabbath school lesson before us that we must pay serious attention to. Don't just study it at the end of the week. Study it all the way through. Apply it. Make it your own, so that we can be a people that tremble at his word, that have been cast out, but we won't fall back. So many have fallen back, haven't they? They're in a chaos state. But we must not fall back. And although they might have said, hooray, we've got rid of these people, the Lord be glorified. The Lord may appear to our joy, while they will be ashamed. Let us conclude our meditation at this conference when we will once again appreciate what actually will be the true religion and the true worship that we will be entering into. Praise the Lord for his word. Amen.